Welcome to Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church online worship. I'm Tina Vayu, and my pronouns are she and hers. I serve as president of the Board of Trustees. Today, we are pleased to welcome the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, Arkansas, to our community. Allen Avenue UU Church is a freely gathered, open, welcoming community supported by your contributions, which can be made with a donate button on our website, by going to our Breeze program if you are a member, or by mailing your check to 524 Allen Avenue, Portland, Maine. Please note if the donation is a pledge or a gift to our Share the Plate. The Share the Plate recipient for January is the Portland Area Villages, whose mission is to provide support and empower seniors who wish to remain living in their homes as long as possible. Volunteers provide services, social connection, and activities for members. You are invited to join us today, January 24th, at 10:45 for a congregational conversation and coffee hour. We hope you'll join us as we welcome the Little Rock congregation to our community. To learn more about the Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church, please go to our website at a2u2.org.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Donna Dahlham, minister of this beloved community of Allen Avenue Unitarian Universalist Church here in Portland, Maine. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'd also like to extend a special welcome to our fellow Unitarian Universalists who are joining us this morning from the UU Church of Little Rock, Arkansas. Our opening words are those of the Reverend Sharon Wiley, adapted. It is said that ministers are here to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. As it turns out, we are all the afflicted and the comfortable. May our time together this morning be a comfort and a confrontation. May we here find peace in times of tumult. May we find here calm in times of restlessness. May we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. Let this be the place where you imagine what you have never imagined before. Let this be the place for the unfolding of something new. Let this time together bring dreams of new ways of doing things and new ways of being in the world. Let us come worship together this morning.
Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Their Voice and Sing as a poem, which was set to music by his brother John Roseman Johnson in 1899. The song is now known as the Black National Anthem in America. It is a protest, a hymn, and a prayer of profound significance for our people. We lift every voice and sing to express ourselves. We lift every voice to show that we have strength in numbers and we will not be silent. We lift every voice and sing to be lifted, liberated, and free.
Freedom, the power to determine action without restraint. Freedom, the absence of or release from ties, obligations, or restrictions. Freedom, the ease or facility of movement or action. Freedom, frankness or boldness in manner or speech. Freedom, a political right. Until we are all free, none of us is free. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of the God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we crave. Oh, lest our feet walk on where we
Hi, my name is Sarah Goldberg. I'm with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Little Rock, and I'll be doing the chalice lighting today. For the Freedom of Faith by Heather K. Jannels. Our prophets died for the freedom of faith. We are here in their spirit. We are here to practice and sustain our living tradition, to light a chalice claiming for justice, the heat and power of fire. In our free faith, we are here seeking freedom from despair, the freedom to be loved as ourselves, and the freedom to grow beyond imagination. We are here, gathered in the name of all that we find holy. Let us give thanks for the gift of gathering. Amen.
There is no love somewhere. There is no love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is no love somewhere. There is no hope somewhere. There is no hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is no hope somewhere.
There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
The day was bright and sunny, as most May days tend to be in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. A dozen men put on their suits and quickly took their places in white robes and those tall and pointed hoods that hid their faces. Their feet fell down in rhythm as they started their parade. They raised their fists into the air, they bellowed and they brayed. They loved to stir the people up. They loved when they were taunted. They didn't mind the anger. It's exactly what they wanted. And as they came around the corner, sure enough, the people roared. But they couldn't quite believe their ears. It seemed to be support. Had Knoxville finally seen the light? Were people coming round? The men thought for a moment that they'd found their kind of town. But then they turned their eyes to where the cheering had its source. As one, their shoulders crumpled when they saw the mighty force. The crowd had painted faces, and some had tacky clothes, their hair and hats outrageous. Each had a bright red nose. The clowns had come in numbers to enjoy the grand parade, and they laughed and danced that other clowns had come to town that day. And then the marchers shouted, and the clowns all strained to hear, each one tuned in intently with a hand cupped to an ear. "White power," screamed the marchers, and they raised their fisted hands. The clowns leaned in and listened like they couldn't understand, and then one held up his finger and helped all the others see the point of all this yelling, and they joined right in with glee. "White flour!" the clowns shouted, and they reached inside their clothes. They pulled out bags and tore them, and huge clouds of powder rose. They poured it on each other, and they threw it in the air. It got all over baggy clothes and multicolored hair. Now all but just a few of them were joining in the jokes. You could almost see the marchers turning red beneath white cloaks. They wanted to look scary. They wanted to look tough. One rushed right at the clowns in rage and was hauled away in cuffs. But the others chanted louder, marching on around the bend. The clowns all marched on too, of course, supporting their new friends. "White power," came the marchers' cry. They were not amused. The clowns grew still and thoughtful. Well, perhaps they'd been confused. They huddled and consulted, this bright and silly crowd. They listened quite intently. Then one said, "I've got it now." "White flowers!" screamed the happy clown, and all the rest joined in. The air was filled with flowers, and they laughed and danced again. Everyone loves flowers, and white's a pretty sort. I can't think of a better cause for people to support. Green flower stems went flying like small arrows from bad archers, and white petals covered everything, including the mad marchers. And then a very tall clown called the others to attention. He choked down all his chuckles and said, "Friends, I have to mention that what with all this mirth and fun, it's sort of hard to hear, but now I know the cause that these paraders hold so dear." "Tight showers," the clown blurted, as he hit his head in wonder. He held up a camp shower, and the others all got under. Or at least they tried to get beneath. They strained, but couldn't quite. There wasn't room for all of them. They pushed, but it was tight. "White power," came the mad refrain, quite carefully pronounced. The clowns consulted once again. Then a woman clown announced, "I've got it. I'm embarrassed that it took so long to see, but what these marchers march for is a cause quite dear to me." "Wife power," she exclaimed, and all the other clowns joined in. They shook their heads and laughed at how erroneous they'd been. The women clowns were hoisted up on shoulders of the others. Some pulled on wedding dresses, chanting, "Here's to wives and mothers." The men in robes were sullen. They knew they'd been defeated. They yelled a few more times, and then they finally retreated. And when they'd gone, a kind policeman turned to all the clowns and offered them an escort through the center of the town. The day was bright and sunny, as most May days tend to be, in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. People joined the new parade. The crowd stretched out for miles. The clowns passed out more flowers and made everybody smile. And what would be the lesson of that shiny southern day? Can we understand the message that the clowns sought to convey? Seems that when you're fighting hatred, hatred's not the thing to use. So here's to those who march on in their big red floppy shoes.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear will burn away. I know my fear will burn away. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know my fear will burn away. I know my fear will burn away. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open.
I invite you into the spirit of prayer or meditation, as is your practice. God of love, Spirit of life, open our hearts this day and all days, so we may live into a community of connection, compassion, and care. When we find ourselves lulled into messages designed to separate and divide us, ignite our spirit of resistance, allowing us to live beyond these false barriers of division. In this nation, where the daily fare of white supremacy still does exist, let our faith lead us to deconstruct systems of oppression. Help us redesign our living with equity, imagination, joy, and hope for a better tomorrow. Let us engage our expressions of faith, shoulder to shoulder, screen to screen, in this congregation, in this community, and beyond. Blessed be.
Each of you, a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast.
All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues.
In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly we do.
One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, then charging across the Rockies. One light waking up rooftops, under each one a story told by our silent gestures moving behind windows.
We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice.
Yet today I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one.
Someone is trying to make music somewhere, a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice.
But where are we going to be? And why? And who? The disenfranchised dead want to know. We mean to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go.
All of us as vital as the one light we move through, the same light on blackboards with lessons for the day, equations to solve, history to question, or atoms imagined, the I have a dream, we keep dreaming, or the impossible vocabulary of sorrow that won't explain the empty desks of 20 children marked absent today and forever.
And yet, the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished.
You who gave me my first name, you, Pawnee, Apache, Seneca, you, Cherokee Nation, who rested with me, then forced on bloody feet, left me to the employment of other seekers, desperate for gain, starving for gold. You, the Turk, the Arab, the Swede, the German, the Eskimo, the Scot, you, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Kru, bought, sold, stolen, arriving on the nightmare, praying for a dream.
We encounter each other in words, words spinny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider.
Who were many people coming together cannot become one people falling apart.
One sky toward which we sometimes lift our eyes tired from work, some days guessing at the weather of our lives, some days giving thanks for a love that loves you back, sometimes praising a mother who knew how to give, or forgiving a father who couldn't give what you wanted.
And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us.
Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again.
Praise song for struggle, Praise song for the day. Praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figure it out at kitchen tables.
We know what we have done and what we have said, and how we have grown degree by slow degree, believing ourselves toward all we have tried to become, just and compassionate, equal, able and free.
We head home through the gloss of rain or weight of snow, or the plum blush of dusk, but always home. Always under one sky, our sky, and always one moon like a silent drum tapping on every rooftop and every window of one country.
We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation.
Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country.
Some live by, love thy neighbor as thyself. Others by, first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love?
All of us facing the stars, hope a new constellation.
If we merge mercy with might, and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright.
And say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning.
Praise song for walking forward in that light.
If we can truly remember, they will not forget.
Waiting for us to map it, waiting for us to name it together.
The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah. I was walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Walking and talking with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I was singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Singing and praying with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Soon we'll be cresting the 7th month of our ministry together. We are indeed called to engage our imaginations. Allen Avenue UU Church is a growing, engaging, and changing community. Any community of faith that is awake and connected to the work that we're called to do is ever changing. This afternoon, we will be holding the second in a 3-series welcome program for folks who are newer to A2U2. We have 10 people who will be joining us this afternoon to learn a little bit more about what A2U2 has to offer. Thank you, Laura Burden, our membership coordinator, for helping get this off the ground this year. A2U2's imaginative programming has invited us to attend art groups, circle suppers, meditations, and more. We are growing and changing, and it has required us to increase our collaboration, creativity, and conversation. For those of us attending Zoom coffee hour on Sunday mornings, it's difficult to actually understand how many people are engaging in the church throughout the whole week. One phenomenon of church life is that it is lived well beyond Sunday mornings. On average, we have about 50 logins to Zoom coffee hour and conversation, except this week, because we're inviting Little Rock, so we hopefully will have a lot more folks. And we have between 120 and 180 views of our YouTube services. COVID has pushed us outside the walls of this building. It has pushed our congregations to imagine a different way of doing church. And this push is what made it possible to welcome the Little Rock congregation to our Sunday worship and coffee hour this week, and made it possible to supplement our beautiful choir with music from their congregation on Christmas Eve. Being pushed outside the walls of our congregations offers us opportunity that we otherwise wouldn't have, like attending the UU Church in Bangor, Maine service from the comfort of your living room while I was out on bereavement leave. Imagination required. As we recognize the connections we have because we are part of a greater Unitarian Universalist association. The Little Rock congregation has experienced this as their minister has been on sabbatical, and they are jumping from state to state on Sundays to get to know different people throughout the association. As we began our adventure here at A2U2 in this settled ministry search and call process, we could not have imagined how we would begin this ministry together. Joe Seal did an amazing job blazing the way beginning in March, well into my arrival, in getting A2U2 online. The A2U2 choir, and probably the Little Rock one as well, could not have imagined that they would be singing their pieces alone at home, only to have someone layer their voices through technology. And John Howard is currently the person who does this for us. Erica Bartlett, Keith Prairie, and I did not imagine doing video editing as a part of worship before last March. Imagine worship leaders figuring out how to put the phone as we're reading and preaching so that you don't have to look up our nose. And imagine that we had to figure out where to put the light, that it needs to be in front of us instead of behind us so we do not disappear into the fog of the dark room. Except for the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is our association's online congregation with thousands of members, I dare to say few worship teams and ministers imagined providing worship and doing tech. We probably did not imagine that the video editing for a Sunday service would take anywhere between 6 and 15 hours, and that there's an additional 5 to 12 hours for the voice editing for songs and hymns and anthems and introits that our member John Howard did for us this week and has been doing. Our imaginations buoy us with curiosity and compassion as we fail our way forward, trying just enough experiments that we surpass what we know how to do. This is a spiritual practice of humility that we are called into in this life that we share right now in community. Imagination required as we participate in the dismantling of systems of white supremacy in our congregation, our association, and our nation. Imagination required as we look at freeing ourselves and widening the circle of concern. Our association has a report from the Commission on Institutional Change, Widening the Circle of Concern. It was just published last June, and it's an opportunity for us to continue our work on an association level, on a congregation level, and on an individual level. Even as I burst into tears as I watched the inauguration earlier this week, I realized that the division still exists. As we recognize the National Day of Remembrance this week for all those who died of COVID and their beloveds, we know this too is not over. It is staggering to recognize that the number of people who have died from COVID in the U.S. equals the number of dead in the Arlington Cemetery. Some of us are more woke than we were before January 6th when the insurrection of the Capitol happened. And for some of us, it was not a surprise at all. To do the work democracy calls us to, we will need to imagine new ways of being together, new ways of doing the work of our church, our faith, and our nation. It is an exhilarating time to be in this ministry with you. It is essential, daunting, and exhilarating. Our congregation, our Unitarian Universalist Association, and our nation need our imaginations. As we engage in anti-racist and anti-oppressive work, we are called to imagine and change. Imagine and change how we engage the functioning of the nuts and bolts of our congregations, of how we imagine democracy in new ways throughout our association. And the last 2 Sundays, you've had an opportunity to come by the parking lot here at A2U2 and pick up your copy of Breathe, our UUA common read this year. And I hope you'll participate in the opportunity for the 3-part discussion that's going to happen next month. Opportunities continue in our congregations. This is not a stagnant time where we're just doing nothing, waiting for time to pass, waiting for something to lift, waiting to get back into our sanctuaries, waiting to get back to how we did things. This is a time of change. It's a time when we are creating new ways of moving beyond the walls of our churches. We are imagining our way forward together. Widening the Circle of Concern had invited us into some work. And we can do this work together. We can do this at community council. We can do this at board meetings. We can do this at membership committee meeting. We can do this at coffee hour. We can do this work together. My colleague, the Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich, put it this way: We'll always have things to work on, both individually and institutionally. How could we not, when white supremacy and other forms of oppression are the air that we breathe in this country? Part of how we stay accountable is by taking stock, naming what's true, and then figuring out how to move forward. Feeling guilty isn't an action, much less one that gets us any closer to being a beloved community. The 8th principle names our aspiration, which we then aim to live up to. Allen Avenue UU Church has a Black Lives Matter banner hanging on the entryway of our building. I wonder sometimes, why didn't it end up out beside the road so everyone can see it? Albert Camus' words come to mind. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that our very existence is an act of rebellion. Imagination required. As we continue to live into community together, I quote the Essential Partners communication workshop I attended in 2018. We are strengthened by our differences and connected by trust. Imagine that we are so absolutely free, that A2U2's way of being, that Little Rock's way of being and functioning are acts of rebellion.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
And in the words of Amanda Gorman, read by Tegan Moon, the new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it.